Okay, hello everybody. How's it going? This is Azren, the language nerd. Whether you're watching this on Facebook or on YouTube or wherever you're watching this, hello. I hope you're having a wonderful day, afternoon, evening, night, whatever it is for you right now as you are watching this video. I'm excited to be recording this. It took me some time to put together what you're about to watch right now. I'm going to share my screen right now. Share screen. Here we go. Okay, so you can see my screen. I'm calling this Your Roadmap to Fluency. It's presented by me, Azren, the language nerd. As you can see on my screen, I run a business called the Calgary Language Nerds, which you can see up here, Calgary Language Nerds. Calgary is a city in Canada. That's where I live. That's where I'm born. That's where I was raised. And I run the Calgary Language Nerds. It's a business that works with a whole bunch of different language learners, and we help them achieve their desired level of fluency in a whole bunch of different languages. If you want to learn more about me, visit azrenthelanguagenerd.com or simply visit @polyglotazren on any social media network. I'm probably going to post this video on my website as well. And so if you're watching this on my website, you're probably on my free course website. And so after you watch this video, you're going to want to scroll down to the bottom of the page. I can even show you here. I may as well show you because I have it open. You're going to want to scroll down, and at the bottom of this page is where you're going to see the detailed course. So what this is, what you're looking at right now on my screen is a comprehensive free course I put together. Here's the course contents at the bottom that walks you through exactly how to achieve a very fluent level in a language, in any widely spoken language. It's free, video-based. I tell you what to learn, when to learn it, how to practice it, how to master it. I give you lots of speaking exercises. I give you written exercises. There's vocabulary lists. There's role plays. There's nice visuals and graphics. There are some PDF workbooks to purchase if you choose to, which can be done right through here. As you can see in this middle section of my screen, it costs $119. You get the workbooks as well as some language coaching sessions with me and a $25 coupon to use towards any language lessons with my business. That's an optional purchase should you choose to, but there's plenty of stuff for free all the way at the bottom of the page. You're going to want to click on the Start Here section. You'll click through these videos. You'll watch these videos. And then I've got all sorts of different levels in the course. So that's something I put together I'm very excited about. Now, today, what we're going to be doing is a little bit different. Let me share my screen again, or rather make this full screen. I want to walk you through the following. I want to walk you through 6 different levels of fluency when it comes to learning another language. And then I want to walk you through how do you progress, in simple terms, how do you progress through each level of fluency? And best of all, I'm going to tell you today how long it typically takes people to get through each level of fluency. And then we have a quick little conclusion at the end. Let's get started. So the 6 levels of fluency are the following. You can see them on my screen here. We have an A1, oops, sorry about that. We have an A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, and C2. These are our 6 levels of fluency. Many language learners, many of you watching this, you may have heard of these 6 levels of fluency before. Let's walk through what they mean in more detail. Okay. Now, these are the levels that have been made. These levels have been made by the CEFR. It stands for the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages. And it's arguably one of the most internationally used, one of the most popular ways to measure fluency in another language. A1 is the lowest level. This is the most beginner level. This means that you can communicate at the most basic of levels in another language. You can maybe share your name. You can maybe answer some very direct, simple questions. If the other person speaks very slowly, you have a rudimentary grasp on a few grammar concepts. And while you're not a complete zero, you're not like a zero in the language, you're not very good at the target language either. If we go a level up, we hit what I call the traveler. That's what I call it. This basically means that you have enough knowledge to get by when you're traveling abroad. So you could go to the train station, buy your train ticket, take the train. You could go take a taxi. You could order food in a restaurant. You could, for instance, have a little bit of small talk. Maybe you meet a local and they ask you a couple of simple small talk questions. You could have a little bit of small talk. These are the types of things you can do at this A2 level. So it's a sufficiently high enough level for you to get by when traveling abroad, but you are by no means fluent. You can only really do things at a surface level. But as a traveler, hey, this is a pretty darn good accomplishment, and that it'll go a long, long way if you're abroad, if you have that A2 level. B1 means you're conversational. So this means you can talk about most day-to-day topics without too much difficulty. You can talk about your family, your personal life, your work, your likes, your dislikes, hobbies. You can talk about where you live. You can talk about where you grew up, where you're from. You can share some future plans, what you're doing on the weekend, maybe some goals you have in the future for yourself. Anything day to day you can cover without, it won't be perfect. You'll make some mistakes. Sometimes you'll get lost for words. You'll get tongue-tied. Maybe you won't always understand what the person you're talking to says, but hey, you can survive and you can converse about the vast majority of day-to-day topics. So this is a big level once you're at a B1. B2 is the end of the line for most language learners, and it means you're fluent. You can talk about basically anything with a reasonable degree of depth and reasonable degree of detail. You can even get into some more technical discussions if it's about a topic you're familiar with. So for instance, if you are someone like me interested in language learning, if you have a B2 level, you can probably talk about that in the target language in a reasonable degree of detail. You know the terms, etc., etc. You can read well. You can probably understand 70% of TV shows and movies, the average TV show and movie. That's pretty good. If someone else talks to you, you might not understand every single word that they say, but you will understand most of it. And even if you miss a few things, you can ask them to say it again, and they can say it again, or maybe rephrase it in slightly different words, and you'll be able to understand it. It's a fluent level in a language. As a fun fact, if you ever want to immigrate to another country, often they're going to require a B2 or a B2 equivalency to demonstrate that you have a strong enough level to go work and find a job and properly integrate within society. Now, if we go one level higher, if we have a C1, C1 means you rarely struggle in the target language anymore. It's pretty close to your first language. Not exactly, your first language is better, but you're pretty darn close. You don't really make that many grammar mistakes. You can talk about basically anything. You can read really well. You write really well. As a fun fact, not even native speakers will have a C1 in every single element of learning a language, because you have reading and writing and speaking and listening. You've got spoken interaction. You've got vocabulary. You've got a lot of grammar. There's a lot of different elements to a language. And not native speakers don't even always have a C1 in every single box and every single category of learning another language. So sometimes people don't even, language learners don't always even care to completely hit a C1, because they're like, well, in my native language, I don't have a full C1 in every single element of a language. And then the same goes for mastery, right? Like the C2 level, like it's funny if you read the requirements, the detailed requirements of a C2, especially on the reading side and the writing side, many native speakers do not have a C2. Many do not. In the spoken interaction side, most people as a native speaker will have that C2 level just on the spoken interaction. So maybe you want to aim for that on a spoken interaction level, but all the way across the board, reading, writing, speaking, and listening wise, not many people aim for a C2, because it's such a high level that you might not even have that in your first language. Possibly not. It's possible you don't. Now, the full free course that I have on my website it's done right now up into a B2 level. That's how much I've completed. But my plan is to be able to put the course together in such a way where you can achieve a C2 if you follow through everything. So these are the 6 levels. Now, the next logical question becomes, how long does it take to hit each level? Let's talk about it. And actually, before we get there, I would ask yourself, I would think about this yourself, like what level of fluency, what level of fluency are you aiming for yourself? Like, what would you like to end up with, in the long term? And obviously, a lot of you might think to yourself, well, of course I want a C2, and that might be true. But I think you have to ask yourself, what's the level you would settle with? Of course you want a C2, but a C2 takes so much work. What's a level you would settle with? Like when you're picturing yourself, what would be something you're like, I'm pretty happy with that. I want the C2. I'll keep going towards the C2, but I'm pretty satisfied with this level. What's the level you're satisfied with? That's an important question for you to know. Most people tends to be B2 at the highest for the vast majority, I find, especially when you look at how long it takes. On that note, let's look at the next page. Here's how long it typically takes to reach each level. There's some caveats to this, which I'll mention on the next slide. The A1 level takes about 6 to 8 months. A2 takes about 1 to 2 years. A B1 takes 2 to 3 years. B1 to B2 is a big jump. It's basically like double. Whatever it took you to hit B1, it's going to take you double, maybe a little longer to hit a B2. So B2, I've written 5 to 7 years. A C1, you're looking at something like B2 plus 3 or 4, something like that. So you're looking at like 10 years, give or take. And a C2, I find it varies. It's also difficult to distinguish, I find. It's hard for people to really quantify in their minds when they've even hit a C2 level. At least that's my personal experience. I've done that for 2 foreign languages where I've hit a C2, French and Spanish being those languages. I remember what it was like to be at a B2 and then to be at a C1. I'm like, oh yeah, I can really feel a difference. The difference between a C2 and a C1, although it is a pretty big difference, I can't, it's very difficult for me to like feel that difference and remember that making that transition. It's like, I don't know, like when did that happen? How did it feel? These waters get kind of murky when you're in those seas because you're just so strong in the language, right? You're so good at the language now that you're just so good, right? It's difficult to really make that distinction. There we go. So C2 kind of varies, but C1 is roughly speaking B2 plus 3 or 4, something like that. Now, the key thing for us to realize here is I've based these numbers, these time frames, on the following. The approximate time to reach each level is based on dedicating about 3 to 5 hours a week toward learning your target language. So if you want to learn faster and you're like, man, Azren, listen, man, I don't want to wait 3 years to become conversational. No problem. You have 2 things you need to do. Option 1, well, not option 1. You have 2 things you probably want to do it in tandem, or maybe, you might do one or the other, but you could do them both together. Take some shortcuts and or dedicate more time to learning the language you're trying to learn. So now you might ask yourself, well, Azren, what do you mean by shortcuts? I understand what it means to dedicate more time. I just got to do more than 3 to 5 hours. Okay, I can quantify that. Maybe I do 10 hours. Okay, I can picture that. Well, what does it mean to take a shortcut? Let me explain. Here's 3 common shortcuts people take. Number 1, focus on being understood, not on being perfect. What does that mean? Well, it means that maybe you're struggling with a particular grammar point, and it's a grammar point that's reasonably small, meaning if you mess it up, the other person still understands. Instead of you focusing on perfecting the grammar point and spending 3 hours on that, you might go, I'm going to not learn that. I'm just going to focus on what I need to learn in order for people to understand me and for me to understand what they say back to me. So let's leave that grammar point aside and spend that 3 hours on not being a perfectionist, and let's focus on making myself understood and understanding what the others say to me. Number 2, for languages that have a different script, you might choose not to learn the script. Like Mandarin, for example, I know lots of people that don't learn the characters. Saves you a lot of time. You're cutting that corner off and you're focusing on the speaking and listening. This works to some degree for languages such as French or Spanish, but or languages that maybe have the same script or the same alphabet, like an ABC alphabet or something like that as what you're used to. So for those languages, this may not save you a crazy amount of time and may not be as applicable. But for languages with a different script, yeah, could be. This might be something worth considering. Could be. And number 3, you learn only what you need to know based on the reasons for learning a language. So if you're learning a language because you want to communicate with your in-laws, you're dating someone or you're married to someone and the in-laws don't speak the language, you can be hyper-focused and only learn the things that are going to help you communicate with your in-laws. You don't need to worry about everything else. So you can cut a lot of the other stuff out and very quickly achieve the goal that you have, which is communicate with your in-laws. Does that make sense? There are, of course, other shortcuts, but these are 3 very common shortcuts. Now, understand that the more advanced you are, the less shortcuts you can take. What do I mean by this? Well, let's go back a few slides. We have 6 levels, right? In my experience, A1, A2, and A3, A1, A2, and B1, those are the 3 levels where you have a tendency, you can take more shortcuts. B2, C1, C2, harder to take shortcuts because you're more advanced. You've got to be more picky with yourself. And there's less shortcuts to take, to be honest, once you're at these higher levels. Okay, let's go 1 slide forward. So our next logical topic to go through is, okay, I understand what the levels are. I understand how long it takes, roughly speaking, to progress through those levels. I understand how to reduce those time frames. Cool. What do I do? What do I do to go from a 0 to an A1, an A1 to an A2, an A2 to a B1? What kinds of things can I do? Well, let me walk you through it. It's simple enough, but you have to be dedicated, of course. Now, for a 0 to an A1, or even an A2, you can even make it to an A2, I've put the following together. I hope there's a chance that on the screen share, I'm going to try something a little different here. I'm going to stop this. Okay, I'm going to do it like this because I have a funny feeling that on the screen share that my Zoom, possibly the Zoom video is blocking a piece of the screen. I'm not sure. So let's do it like this to be safe so you can see all the text. The way that I've structured this for the lower A1 to 0 to A1 or 0 to A2 level is I've structured this in a way where you can do it basically by yourself, and you don't have to have a teacher or take classes or a tutor or anything like that. You can do this at home easily enough. Okay. So you want to do each task below for 15 to 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. Remember, if you want to learn faster, increase that time. Do 6 days a week. Do an hour a day. Don't burn yourself out. Your brain does need breaks, just like when you work out, you have to let your muscles rest, but you can do more than this. First of all, you want to find some good self-study resources, okay? You want to find some good ones. Do your research. Every language has different resources. I need you to spend an hour or 2 Googling, watching YouTube reviews, and seeing really what are the best resources. Do not be afraid to spend money. Often, good resources will cost some money. Hopefully not, usually not too much, but you will. Don't be afraid to spend money here. Don't be afraid. You generally get what you pay for. Generally, you get some exceptions where something's free and it's amazing and blah, blah, blah. Like I do some of that sometimes, but don't be afraid to spend some money here and really do your research to see what are the best resources, self-study resources for the language that you're trying to learn. Now, while you're using these resources, I want you need to talk to yourself out loud. Use a dictionary as needed. Literally, what I want you to do is in a mirror, I want you to talk to yourself. Sometimes as a pure beginner, you can only really say some words. You can't even say a full sentence, but you want to work your way up to saying full sentences and then having short little dialogues with yourself. You want to work your way up to doing that. And by using the self-study resources, not hopefully, if you found a good one, you'll be learning enough words and phrases, maybe some grammar. You'll be learning enough to be able to actually talk to yourself to some extent. Really short things, nothing that complicated, but you should be able to at least start. You're welcome to use a dictionary as needed, but you are not allowed to use an online translator. No translators allowed, because translators, do the thinking for you. I want you to use your brain. So dictionaries are allowed, but no online translators. Also, I encourage you to use YouTube and Google. If you get stuck on how to say something that you want to communicate, Google it. How do you say this? Or not even Google this. How do I say that? Because then you might end up with a translator. Sometimes you're stuck on how to say something because you've got some kind of grammatical gap. You're more than welcome to Google that grammar point. If you're like, wow, I'm trying to say something in the past. I don't know how to say stuff in the past. How do I talk in the past in Spanish or French or German or whatever? You're welcome to YouTube it or Google that. Totally fine. Watch some videos. You're like, that'll fall into some self-study resources. That's really good to do that. I also want you to write some practice sentences and work your way up to writing short paragraphs on a variety of different topics. Ideally, you want to have your writing corrected by a native or advanced speaker. That could be a tutor, it could be a friend, a family member, someone you know, could be, you might, there's a few options. You might want to download, if you don't have anyone to correct your writing and you don't want to pay for a tutor, you might want to download, I'll show you the following here. It's on another slide. I'll just kind of fast forward. You may want to download HelloTalk or Tandem. These are apps that you can use to find native speakers of a language, and they'll help you, they'll practice with you for free as long as you practice your first language with them. It's like an exchange. So that might be one place to look if you don't want to hire a tutor to get your writing corrected and get some feedback on it. Okay. So you got to do this 15 to 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week minimum for each one of these 3 things. Let me reshare. Let me make this full screen again so you can see nice and big. Hopefully the Zoom camera in the top corner is not blocking anything. Sometimes it does, so hopefully it's not though. We have some other important strategies too. Watch YouTube videos or Netflix shows, listen to music, listen to news or other podcasts, and very important, make friends who speak the target language. And for each of these 4 activities, you want to make sure you're doing it in such a way where you're surrounding yourself with native speakers. So when you watch things on YouTube, you're not watching things that are meant for language learners. You're watching things that are meant for native speakers. If it is meant for language learners, that's not bad. It just means that it falls into the self-study category that I mentioned on the previous page. See here, I said use self-study resources. Well, if it's a YouTube video teaching you a grammar point, that's wonderful, but that is not a way for you to surround yourself with native speakers, right? Listening to music, that's music in the target language. Podcasts or news in the target language. Now, you might not understand the vast majority, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It's important to be listening to how real people speak, in my opinion, from the beginning, and observing, imitating, catching what you can, asking other people for help to say, hey, what does that mean? I heard something there. What does that mean? If you go through the actual full course I put together, on how to learn a language, there's some activities I specifically give on how to watch YouTube videos and Netflix and what to pull away from them. There's some activities I give you, but for time's sake, we won't talk about that now. Right, making friends who speak the target language is a really big one, especially as you get more advanced. So I would do that early on. Maybe I can make a whole course on how to do that. Some people make it really easy, can do it really easily. Some people struggle, but this is a big one. I even watched a video recently that's saying that, and the guy said that Ollie Richards is the guy, you might know who he is if you follow his content. He's saying that one thing polyglots often do well is they're really good at creating circles around them of people that speak the target language as their first language, or they find people like that, they find groups like that. And that's very true. That's been a really big thing for me and many other people that successfully learn a language. Even if you're introverted and you're kind of shy, you could even find even just a small group of people using, on, good Lord, you can use something like meetup.com, meetup.com. That's a great place to look. You might try to use HelloTalk or Tandem. These are 2 apps to make some one-on-one friends. You might even hire a tutor and you become friends with your tutor. You might be able to leverage your tutor to meet other people, right, that speak the native language. There's a lot of different options to be able to do this. And it's a pretty important step, I find. Important. This is very important. If you are not progressing using the strategies on the previous 2 pages, I think it's important for you to sign up for semi-private or private lessons. Listen, some people, I'm actually one of them, fun fact. You're going to struggle by purely self-teaching. It's not the way for you to learn. That's just how some people are. And listen, try some self-teaching, right? Try these methods here. For me, probably wouldn't. I'm not diligent enough. I'm not going to do it. I'm too lazy. I just won't do it. I need to take lessons. I take group classes. I take private classes, semi-private lessons. I need some lessons. Right from the beginning, I do. I do a lot of self-study too, but I find if I don't take lessons, I don't do the self-study activities. I don't know if it's I'm not disciplined or I get busy with other things. I'd have to analyze myself psychologically to see what's going on there, but this is a big one. Otherwise, you're going to get caught 8 years later and you're stuck at a pre-A1 level after 8 years of trying to do it by yourself. Spend the money, take some classes. I'm telling you, I've met a number of people that they've spent 9 years trying to figure it out by themselves and they haven't progressed very much. Like, don't do that. I kind of made that mistake for my health. Like since 2016, I've been getting healthier and I have made progress, but I've made more progress in the past 10 months of actually working with someone who gives me home workout programs, seeing him monthly. He tracks my progress. We talk about it. Actually hiring that person and paying what does it cost me? It costs me about, what does it cost? He charges me, I think 60 or 75 a month in my case. It actually might be more than that. Anyway, I think it's maybe 90 a month. Can't remember the exact number anymore, but that's okay. It's like $75 to $90 a month. It's been well worth the money. I've progressed way more with my health than I had beforehand. Language is kind of the same thing. And I want it to be semi-private or private because group lessons, unfortunately, you can hide behind the other people. And if you've been trying to self-teach and you haven't been able to, you need that individual attention. And ideally, you want to work with someone has successfully helped other languages break that beginner stage and move into an upper beginner or low intermediate. You want people who have done that successfully. So ask the tutor before you pay them, how many students have you taught and how many have you helped, but like have successfully worked with to go from beginner to upper beginner or lower intermediate? You want to ask them and see how they answer that. It's an important question to ask. Okay, so you have an A1, maybe an A2 level, okay? You want to continue doing everything you did to reach your current level in order to reach a B1, right? You want to keep doing whatever you're doing before. Keep going. Don't really stop much, but you want to add a couple things. You want to download HelloTalk or Tandem for additional speaking practice and texting practice. Okay. I already told you what this app is. These are apps that connect you to native speakers. They will help you practice that language you're trying to learn, as long as you help them practice a language you speak well, such as your first language. This is also a great time to hire a conversational tutor. You want to take private or semi-private conversation-oriented lessons. I say schedule at least 1 lesson per week. You can do that through my business if we offer the language that you're learning. If not, Google it, look in your city, look online classifieds websites, lots of places you can look and you can find yourself a tutor for most widely spoken languages. Okay. Now, you don't necessarily have to have a tutor or necessarily have to download this app. The whole goal here is you need to have people you are consistently speaking with, native speakers, to help, and you need to get that consistent output practice and the input practice of hearing them speak, them talking to you. You need that to get to that B1 level. You need to start incorporating other people. It's quite difficult, I find, to get to a B1 without that. Not to say it's not possible, but the way I approach whenever I give advice, I try to approach it by saying, here's what works for a significant number of people. There are outliers that will have other methods, and that's fine, but I don't talk too much about those. I want to give stuff that I think is tried and true and works for most people. And for most people, you'll probably need a tutor supplemented by some HelloTalk, conversational tutor, supplemented by HelloTalk or Tandem, with the exception of people, for example, me. I remember for about a year and a half, every Saturday without fail, I used to organize this drop-in free Chinese class, Mandarin class. And these Mandarin speakers used to come every week. And without fail, every week we'd go hang out somewhere afterwards. And I would get lots of Mandarin practice. I didn't need private lessons at the time. I didn't really need it. I was getting 4 hours of practice, 3 hours of practice, 2 hours of practice every Saturday. Conversation, listening to them speak, learning new words like every week. So I didn't need to hire a tutor because I was getting so much of it. But if you don't have that, a tutor is your fastest option. HelloTalk and Tandem are nice too. It's not as good as a tutor. There's a variety of reasons for it. But it's still a good secondary option if for whatever reason, God, the tutor is the best option if you don't have it. Like that's a really good one. Save up the money. Like it can be reasonably affordable. It doesn't have to be very expensive. Save some money. Really, if you can swing it, this will make a big, 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 big difference. Now, once you're at a B1, how do you hit the B2? That's a big step because that B2 is like that fluent level. I'm a fan of taking semi-private or private lessons with someone who knows how to go from a B1 to B2. You might need to switch tutors at this point. If you're using a tutor before, there's a chance you'll have to switch. Maybe. You need to be if you're going to have a tutor at this point, and again, you might not need it. You might not, possibly. It's an option, right? Like people have done it without the tutor for sure. So you might not need it, but if you are going to, because it can help a lot of people, it has to be someone that's successfully helped people go from a B1 to B2 and they know what to do with you. They need to know what to do with you. They can't just be someone who's going to do conversation practice with you. That's probably not what you need. Because you'll feel like you're stuck. People stagnate at a B1. They feel like they're not progressing anymore. One reason for that is they're just doing more conversation practice, and that's not quite what you need. Not quite. It's not really, it might be too easy to do that. Like me just conversing and doing conversation practice in Mandarin, for instance, is not enough. I'm at like a B1.6, 1.7. I'm almost at a B2. Just conversation is not going to get me to a B2. You want to continue doing some HelloTalk in Tandem. You want to cut back on your self-study programs. You might even stop using them altogether. The vast majority of self-study programs, there are exceptions like mine, the one on my website here, azrenthelanguagenerd.com/free course, like that one is designed to go to a very high level. So that one, for example, you might keep using. There are other programs out there that work for advanced levels, but the vast majority aren't great for a B1 plus level. So you might cut out quite a few of them, if not all of them. You want to maximize time spent with native speakers in non-academic environments. This goes back to the importance of, if you can have even just a small friend circle, knowing some people who speak the target language, be able to grab coffee with them, go do things with them, that'll really benefit you. Read, read, read. This is a big one. Reading is key at this point. Reading will help you expand your vocabulary and increase it. And that's so important. One of the biggest gaps, if not the biggest gap between a B1 to B2 is vocabulary. That's the big one. That's the big kahuna. Is that a thing? Big kahuna, or did I make that up? Anyway, it's not important. So reading is a big one, because here's a fun fact. The words we use on a day-to-day basis in conversations and such is only a fraction of the words that we actually know as native speakers. So reading is a place where we actually see a lot of these words. So I would read a lot, fiction, nonfiction, read. It'll help you a lot. And I'd watch lots of YouTube and Netflix or listen to podcasts that are designed for native speakers. This is a big thing to be doing, and it will help you a lot to go to from that B1 to B2. Yeah, your big gap is in your vocabulary here, right? That's your big, big, big one. On the note of vocabulary, there we go. A good idea is to create a vocabulary journal. So I'll just read what's on my screen here. At a B1 level, one of your biggest learning gaps is vocabulary. So for this reason, I recommend creating a separate notebook to write down new words and phrases you learn. Quiz yourself every time you've added 75 to 100 new words. The objective is to get more words correct each time you quiz yourself. Don't worry about the percentage of words you remembered. What does this mean? So let's say you have 100 words on your list and you quiz yourself and you only score 33%, meaning you forgot 67 of 100 words. That's okay. Don't worry about that. This is not, you need to get your mind outside of a school mentality where you fail tests and, oh, you need to get a good mark. No. you're probably going to get 25%, 40%, 30%. That's fine. That's just what's going to happen. That's how it is. It's normal. Remembering something in the language is very different than remembering a history fact in school. For some reason, when it comes to words, vocabulary, grammar, for some reason, how do I say this? You can't just read it once or twice and study it and remember it. That's not how it works. You have to mess it up about 8 times before it sticks in your brain, or 7 or 4. Some things will stick really fast, but sometimes you'll have to mess it up 12 times before it sticks in your head. Just how it works. So failure in language learning is you have to measure it very differently than failure in other subjects. So how do you measure success or failure with your vocabulary journal? Here's what you do. You're going to quiz yourself every 75 to 100 words, right? You don't need to quiz yourself before that. You don't need to review too much. It's okay. Don't worry. The goal is every time you quiz yourself, you get more right answers than the previous time. So if the first quiz, you got 33 on 100, the second quiz, you get 46 on 200, that's actually okay because you went from 33 correct to 46 correct. You progressed. That's how you measure success and failure. So if the first time you take the test, you get 23 on 100, the second time you get 20 on 200, you should re-quiz yourself again on the 200 to get a score higher than 23. Does that make sense? And you probably won't happen, to be honest. If you're doing this, you generally will score higher each time, generally speaking. Okay. Yeah, anything else on this page? You might quiz yourself less than 75. I'm not married to 75 to 100 words, to be honest. I'm not married to that number. It's a number I've picked. Some people might do more. Some people might do less. I'm not married to the number. That's one I picked. You might go every 50 words, every 25. You can play with that number. That number is not super important. I do 75 to 100, but you could do less or more. It's up to you there. I'm not married to this number here. Now, B2 to a C1 or C2. This is getting real advanced now. I think there's a chance you can't see my top right of the screen. Hopefully you can. So you're going to continue what you did to achieve a B2 level. You might drop a couple things. Like if there's something you're doing that wasn't super useful and you're like, that's not really that useful for me anymore. I don't feel like it's helping me. You can drop a few things. You can make some modifications, but generally you can continue what you were doing at a B2. But the big keys for a B2 to a C1 or even a C2, number one is you've got to challenge yourself. Discuss different topics with native speakers, things you're not familiar with. Hang out with different native speakers. Switch people up. Maybe someone's got a different accent than you're used to. They talk different. I know 2 people, they're friends. One of them, when he talks to me, I understand 90% of what he says, and we can communicate very easily. His friend, I don't know what it is with her. Her accent's the same. They're from the same city. But the way the words she chooses, for some reason, I don't know them. So I understand about 40% of what she says. It's so strange. So I hang out. I would, if she were in Calgary, she's not here anymore. She moved back. But if she were still here, I would spend lots of time with her because that's a challenge for me. And that helps me like learn a lot of new things, right? You might watch and read content that's harder for you to understand. Maybe you're used to watching like, I don't know, Netflix dramas in the target language, and that's all you've been watching, and now that's getting easy. Watch a game show, watch a mystery, watch science fiction, watch a documentary, watch some different content that'll expose you to different types of words and vocabulary and different speakers, right? Explore new and unfamiliar scenarios in the target language. Challenge yourself. That's one of the biggest keys to go from, well, really any level to any level, but especially B2 to the C1 or C2 level. And also you got to find, this is where you got to get picky. You got to fine tune your language abilities. Like the C1 and C2 levels are such a high level. It's like saying if you have it's like saying, here's a good analogy. It's like if someone gets 50% on every test they write in school, to get them from a 50 to a 70, it's not super challenging. Like there's some simple things you can probably tell someone who's getting 50% to help them make that 10 to 20% jump. But if someone's getting a 92% on their tests all the time, To go from a 92 to a 98 is really hard. There's a lot of this little fine tuning you got to do. Or like we just had the Olympics. When I'm recording this, we just had the Olympics like a month or two ago. Those guys are such amazing athletes that the difference between a win and a loss are these such minute differences. And from a B2 to a C1, C2, like there's some small things you just got to fix, fine tune things, right? Strive to express yourself more fluently and a bit more precisely. Instead of saying, I'm so mad, maybe you got to say, I'm furious. Instead of saying, I love that, maybe say, that intrigues me, that interests me, right? Maybe you're saying, I like it, but you actually want to say it intrigues me, but you don't have the word intrigue. Be more precise with your language. Work on fixing lingering problems. Maybe there's some grammar stuff you skipped and you just ignore it and it's been fine. Well, to get to a C1, you probably got to fix it, figure it out. Fill in any language gaps you still have. You're like, man, I really suck at this. So that's something to work on, right? And that's how you get to those advanced levels here. So in conclusion, learning a language definitely isn't easy, no doubt about it, but it is possible. I'm telling you, I've now seen enough language learners. I've seen enough people that are very slow learners when it comes to learning a language. But I've seen enough people now, and I've worked with enough that I feel confident in saying that the average adult is able to achieve a reasonably strong level in another language. It might take longer for some people, might take shorter for others. You might have different challenges, but you can do it. Like to achieve let me just go way back to make a very specific statement. I think the average adult, I think it's fair to say that almost the average adult can hit a B1 level, can get there. Yeah, can get there for sure. Just takes time, effort. Some people a little longer than others, some people shorter, but a B1 is like, yeah, I think you can get there. A B2, I think the vast majority can get there as well. This might be a longer journey for some, but that is in the cards for the majority of language learners, at least in terms of interaction, maybe not with your writing, maybe not with your reading, because heck, you might not have a B2 in reading in your own language, your first language. I know people that just don't. They don't have a B2 in the reading in their own language, the writing in their own language. So if you don't have that in your own language, you're definitely not getting there to in your target language, the language you're trying to learn, right? But a B1, yup. B2, at least in terms of interaction and like communicating, being comfortable, yes. I think that for sure is quite doable. C1 and C2 starts to get a bit more. It's harder. I haven't seen enough to make definitive statements. But B1, like B2 is so strong. I mean, you don't even need more than a B2 in any kind of like day-to-day scenario, even like the professional scenarios, you don't really need much more than a B2. You almost always. So it's a huge accomplishment. And you can do it. Oops, here we go. So yeah, that wraps up this presentation. Good luck on your language learning journey. I'm Azren, the language nerd, owner of the Calgary Language Nerds. I'd love to work with you if you're trying to learn a language. There's lots of cool services we have and programs we have, both free and paid, for a wide variety of language learning needs. Simply send me a message at polyglotazren or visit azrenthelanguagenerd.com. As a final reminder here on my website, if you simply go to azrenthelanguagenerd.com, there's a free self-guided course. You might already be on this page watching this video on that page. Simply scroll to the bottom or click this big green button right here. It takes you down to all the course contents. Leave a donation if you like the course. I always appreciate that. And you can start working your way through the course here. Very detailed course, worksheet, exercises, speaking exercises, reading exercises, listening, and vocabulary list. You name it, it's there. Some of you may choose to purchase the workbooks, in which case you scroll halfway down this page and you can purchase the workbooks used in this course. And I think it'll be very useful for you. So hope that was useful. Hope you benefited. I know it's a longer video. I have no idea if there's Facebook comments or what's going on. I have no clue, but hopefully it's still working. I have no idea if it was. I didn't know I don't know how this Facebook Live and all that works. So anyway, have a wonderful day. We'll talk soon. How do I end this? I actually don't know. I think I click on this button. See you.